Do you ever hear audio on podcasts or on the radio that's so bad you want to say, "Don't make me use my announcer voice"? Hi, I'm Kirk Harnack. Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Chris Curran is our guest. He's an expert at small studios, podcasting, and production of podcasts. He's got great advice on microphones, your recording space, and what to do after it's recorded. It's all coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. And this week, we're going to stop well before the light bulb at the top of the tower. Although, some of what we're talking about applies to home broadcasters. So, yeah, okay, we'll still get to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm so glad you've joined us. It's our 526th episode of This Week in Radio Tech. We've been going strong for over 11 years now. And, I'm by now, I don't know when to stop making mention, but by now, surely you have heard. And if you haven't, the news is that my dear beloved co-host, Chris Tobin, passed away just about 3 weeks ago. And we had a beautiful service for him. It was held on a Zoom meeting, and that was just this past Sunday. He passed away of a cardiac arrest way too early. He was 59 years old and was my co-host on this show for 11 years. And Chris and I have known each other since the mid-90s. I met him when he worked at ABC Radio Networks in New York. And just so many accolades for Chris. I have promised several times that we will do a tribute video to Chris on the show. It won't be during a TWiRT show. It'll be an extra thing that we do, and we will do that. I'm terribly sorry. I just haven't been able to afford the time to do that yet with all the activities of the wake and the funeral service and all that. So we will get to that. If you didn't get to participate or see the funeral on Zoom, we will have a beautiful tribute to Chris here in the coming, I wish I could say days. It might be weeks, but we will do a beautiful tribute to Chris. All right. Well, that being said, Chris would want us to move right along with the show, and I'm delighted today to bring in someone who I met about 3-4 years ago, Chris Curran. Chris, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. Good to see you.
Hey, happy to be here. This is great. Thank you so much, Kirk. Thank you.
So you are you're the founder of a school about podcasting and podcast engineering, and you also produce some kind of big time podcasts yourself. Why don't you give us a little taste of who is Chris Curran and why are you qualified to talk to us today?
Yeah, well, I started in audio way back in the 90s in the music business. I worked in a bunch of big studios and worked on a bunch of albums and got a bunch of album credits and did all that fun stuff in the 90s. But in 2012, I started producing podcasts. And in 2016, I started teaching podcast production. That's my school, Podcast Engineering School. And it really goes deep into the audio production. So it's been great.
Your background in music. Now I know why during our pre-show, we talked a lot about post-production and the various plugins, VST things that you can do to enhance the audio and really, bring it from 95% to 110%. And so you're going to talk about some of those things on the podcast today. So, hey, if you're watching and you're interested in getting better audio from your podcast, and no matter if you do a live podcast like we do this one, or if you do a more traditional produced podcast where maybe you do segments, you record them, you put them together, you have roundtable discussions, and you top and tail that, we got great advice for you, both in some engineering, some equipment selection, some room ambiance selection, and post-production, how to fix problems that you just couldn't avoid, and how to just enhance what you have so that your podcast isn't hard to listen to, right? So that your podcast is easy to listen to, and the production values don't get in the way, so that the content is what really comes through. So I know I just made a big promise there for all of you, and I think Chris Curran is going to is going to help fulfill that promise. Hey, I do want to mention real quick about one of my favorite publications. That's Radio Guide. Radio Guide and This Week in Radio Tech have an agreement. We're going to be trading authors and guests. So I'm really excited about that. Ray Top suggested that we do that. Ray is the publisher of Radio Guide. And I love this. It comes out every other month. And the articles are really in-depth. They're lengthy articles. Oh, look, here's an article that's about something we're going to be talking about today. On this, George Zahn has written a comparison of the Shure SM7 and the new Shure MV7. And Chris Curran told me that we'd be talking about that on this show today, too. So, hey, very topical information, obviously, in Radio Guide magazine. I encourage you to check out their website, and you can subscribe to the print version of this as well. I would it's radio-guide. Yeah, they had to get the dash in there to get the website, radio-guide.com. Highly encourage it. Good magazine. Whoops, what did I knock over?
Nice.
All right. Chris, well, we got a lot to cover. Would you like to start with that microphone analysis, the Shure MV7, or where would you like to begin today?
Yeah, we could start with that. You mentioned something earlier about there's different aspects to focus on in audio production, and I think it is good to just state clearly up front that, avoiding all of the audio problems is better than fixing them in post. Yeah. And I know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? That is really, really important. Because if you can avoid problems, then you don't have to spend time fixing them. So, but yeah, onto the Shure the MV7.
MV7. Hey, if you don't mind, I'll give one quick example of that. For literally since I was, 15 years old, I've been a disc jockey, right? I was on the radio for years and years and have gotten to do this show and other things. And I got into reading audiobooks, and I've got about 7 books that I have credit on audible.com. About 3 of them are really good books, and several are kind of middle in there. But in recording those books, I recorded them for quite a while with a good microphone, but no mic processing. And also not good attention to making clicks with my mouth. And so I would record this and I go back and, oh my goodness, I spent so much time just cutting out breath, just little like that. And I got the mic processor, and oh my goodness, using the mic processor and adjusting it properly cut down my editing time by literally 2/3. I was now spending 1/3 the time editing that I previously had spent fixing all these little things in there. And then also I had some noisemakers in the room I didn't even realize. My wife came in here one day and said, "That clock is going tick, tick, tick." I said, "You're right, it is." So I got the clock. It's now out in the hallway. It's not in the room. So you're right. Do it right the first time, and post-production becomes a lot easier. So I'm sorry. I had to get that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, at least avoid the big mistakes. That's key. But yeah, there's those 2 mics you showed in the radio guide. It's the new one is the Shure MV7, which is based off the famous Shure SM7B, which everybody uses and on all that. And the MV7, it's cheaper. It's $249. You could see that on the screen, and it's pretty good. It's USB and XLR, which is handy. And it also had, my favorite part of it is it has onboard processing.
What?
And there's a compressor. You can literally, when you plug in that mic USB, you can open up the little app in the computer and you can turn on some compression. And I tested it with some of my friends and colleagues, and it really brings the voice a lot closer and more, and just adds a little bit of clarity and more like, in your faceness, what I like to call it. So that's pretty good, man. Right?
Huh. Wow. Now, speaking of its predecessor, or the thing that it looks a lot like, the famous Shure SM7B, why is that mic so popular? That's the one that's got the yoke in the middle, and the cable actually comes out of a thing on the yoke instead of out of the mic body itself, which is weird. But you see these mics, you may see them so often you just don't even notice them, folks. But watch for Shure SM7Bs. They are on so many programs nowadays, video and audio podcasts. Why are they so popular?
Well, they sound good. That's the short answer. But they have good clarity, but they don't have an accentuated high end. So they're not sharp and like they don't poke at you. They're not sharp like that. They're smooth. They're kind of clear, but they're smooth. And yeah, I mean, the mics, it's a very old mic, at least from the 70s. And, you know, everybody knows that, oh, Michael Jackson recorded Thriller with an SM7B, which is true. It's just a great mic. And nowadays, like, you know, everybody probably sees Joe Rogan using one, and a lot of people use them now. It's just a really good mic. I don't know how they made it or what they did, but it's great.
Some of what we're going to be talking about here is basic fundamental stuff, and other stuff is more esoteric stuff. So, hey, all of you viewers and listeners, if we're talking about stuff that's basic and simple, don't worry. We'll get to in-depth, more complex, more esoteric stuff too. And if you're put off by the esoteric stuff, hang on, we're talking about fundamental stuff too. The SM7B is what you call a dynamic microphone as opposed to a condenser microphone. So what benefits are there to a dynamic microphone like the Shure SM7B?
Dynamic mics are less sensitive than condenser microphones. So dynamic microphones like the SM7B pick up less background noise or room noise. They still pick up some, but less. Condensers, on the other hand, which is normally like for music, like when people record vocals with music, usually they use a really expensive condenser microphone because the clarity and the articulation is really good. Dynamic microphones don't have that articulation, but they're just less sensitive, so they pick up less background noise. That's why a lot of people in the podcast industry recommend dynamic mics to podcasters, because most podcasters are not in a sound treated room, and so if you have a dynamic mic, it'll pick up less noise and less room noise, and it works out well.
Now, I've got a couple examples right here of condenser mics. This is a very cheap one. You see this one all the time on Amazon or eBay. This one can be had for, I think I actually paid about $12 or $13 for this one. It's Chinese made, kind of a knockoff, but it's got a capsule up here. And you know what? In a perfect sound environment, many of these sound okay. I did record quite a few things with it just to try it out. But I think in manufacturing, you get some examples that aren't okay. You know, at the factory, they crank these things out and they don't test them for quality, audio quality. They test them to make sure they make noise. And so you might get a good one, you might get a not so good one. But these are really inexpensive. Typically, they're about $20, $25 or so. On the other spectrum, here's an example of one made by a company called Violet, which is a competing family branch to the Blue microphones, which have become pretty popular. This one's called the Globe, and it's a condenser, but it does really pick up all around. So I used this one on our podcast early on in our production 11 years ago because I had it. It was sold to me at a very low price by the manufacturer of Violet microphones, and I liked it. But it was a little bit difficult to deal with because I don't have a perfect studio environment. And the one exception to the condenser mic thing is a different design. That's the one that I use right here. This is a shotgun mic, and it's technically a condenser mic, although it's got a rather sophisticated circuit in it. It actually has a radio transmitter in it that it's complicated. But since it's a shotgun design, it rejects off-axis really well. So this is off-axis, you don't hear me nearly as well. And then this is on-axis, so you hear me very well. So this one's good at rejecting room noise, but it's a bit unusual for an announcer mic. Some voiceover people do use these, and I had some money one day, and I thought I'd buy one. So
yeah, that's a great mic. I actually bought one of those too, and I haven't used it very much. I tried using it right at my desk, but it's a funny thing about about shotgun microphones. Sometimes in closed spaces, they don't sound that good. Like, you know, so, and that mic, that's a MKH 416, correct?
It is. You got the number exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that mic is world famous, used on all kinds of movies. And it literally, it's about $1,000 mic, and it's unbelievable quality, as you can hear in Kirk's voice. But I tried on my desk right here, and it just, something about where I am in the room, it just, maybe I'm too close to that wall, but yeah, interesting. Good. And that's because it's a shotgun. It's rejecting a lot of the sound from the sides and only picking it up from the front. Yeah.
But the off-axis rejection of this shotgun mic or any mic that's designed, like, for example, I love the Heil PR40. It's a dynamic mic, and Bob Heil designed it to reject everything that's off axis. But it's not perfect. It can't be perfect. The shotgun mic is not perfect. So there are some places where it will pick up, and maybe those just happen to be an angle where things bounced from. I think, well, I'll tell you what, I'll let you give the advice. When people are trying to pick a mic, what might be a good way to, over time, you're not going to get this done in one day. You're going to end up either buying a mic or borrowing a mic and trying it out and see how your voice is with it. What's a good way to do some mic comparison?
Yeah, I mean, at Podcast Movement and at Podfest several years ago, I set up a microphone test drive booth. I had 10 microphones in a row, and people could come by. They would speak into each of the 10 mics, and I would record it. A few days after the conference, I would send them the audio, and then they could literally hear their voice on 10 different mics. If you can do something like that, that's the best way to do it. If you can't do that, then you just got to, try a mic here and there. I mean, you can definitely, buy a mic online and then try it. And if you don't like it, you can return it. It's not easy to try different microphones. Like you said, borrowing is another good option. If you know people who have mics, that you can borrow one. Or maybe if there's sometimes in local meetups, like podcaster meetups or any audio meetup, some of the members might have various mics, and maybe you could borrow them and try them out.
Yeah. And your mic selection, I guess, would also depend partly on your own style of delivery and movement. For example, I like to be close to the mic. I like that intimate sound. And I'm accustomed to being able to move my head around and keep my mouth in relatively the same place. I'm not just over here and over here and over here. If you're doing this, you need a different mic than a shotgun, right?
Yes, and I wouldn't recommend moving around like that to anyone, regardless of what mic you have.
That's a good point.
And that microphone technique, that's on our list to talk about today.
Okay.
But yeah, the aesthetic has a lot to do with it. There are some mics that look good, that look better than others. And so if you want to get a mic because of the look, that's fine. Just make sure you use good mic technique and some of these things we're going to talk about, because, I guess there may be sort of a perfect match between a person's voice and the mic they use. But you might not ever find that perfect match. You could find a good match, and then that'll be fine for sure.
Yeah. Is it worthwhile to say that just because a mic sounds good in your headphones, and I'm wearing an earbud, I'm used to having one ear listening and the other one open, whereas you've got both ears covered. And when I was a disc jockey, I covered both ears all the time. And sometimes we're doing the show with those sports headsets, we cover both ears. But just because a mic maybe sounds good to you, maybe it's over accentuating something. And my biggest complaint is sometimes I thought a mic just sounds really good on me. And the fact is, it had way too much bass, and I thought, yeah, well, I sound really good with all that bass there, yeah. But in truth, it was just too much, and the mic was accentuating that, or my proximity was accentuating that to the point where it wasn't helpful. How should you get other people to evaluate your voice on a given microphone?
Yeah, you can for sure. But I think, see, you mentioned that you have your earbud in, and I'm wearing headphones. The way to evaluate your voice and how it sounds on a particular mic is not to talk into it and hear it simultaneously, because that's because you're hearing your own voice through the bones and your skull. So what you need to do is record your voice and then listen back to it. And that's when you can really hear what it sounds like.
Of course, that's primo advice right there. You can't evaluate it in a closed loop just right now. You got to record it and listen back.
Yeah, that's why some of these shows, like these trade shows where they have microphones where you can walk up and you can put on headphones and walk up and talk into the mic, and you can hear yourself, and then you move to the next mic and you talk and you hear yourself. It makes people think that they can evaluate the mic right there while they're talking into it. But I submit that you cannot. I think you need to record it and hear it back when you're not talking.
I interrupted you actually on that Shure evaluation or describing it. This new microphone, the MV7, is pretty interesting. Now, there's been a mic or two before this that have these features too, but it's got both an XLR mic output, and it has a USB connection. Although it's not exactly new, it is pretty unusual. Why is that useful to people?
Yeah, having both those ports, well, it's just handy. So if you want to plug in USB, you can. If you want to use, let's say you have an expensive channel strip or some audio hardware gear that you want to use, you can run the XLR cable into that, or you can do both. I mean, you could plug the USB into your computer and record on your computer, and then maybe for a backup, you take the XLR out of the mic and you record it into like a little handheld recorder, just as a backup. So it's handy if you want to do either way or even both. So
I've got one of those Audio-Technica mics around here that does have both XLR and USB. And every time I go look for it, I can't find it. And then when I'm not looking for it, I come across it. A couple other mics. Let me just get your opinion on this. This is this looks like a Shure, SM58? Is that what that looks like?
57.
Is that 57, sorry.
57.
And this is popular, it seems like, with singers on stage. Is that right?
Not real. The 58 is the one that's popular on stage, the SM58.
Okay.
Yeah. Which, by the way, the 57 and the 58 are exactly the same mic. It's just the top is a little different. It looks different on top.
So why do people like this particular top? Why have I seen this before?
Well, so the 57 in music production is normally used for like guitar cabinets and snare drums. It's handy to record musical instruments. Yeah.
Okay. Now I got to tell you, this one is not a Shure. This is a very cheap knockoff. And I need to make it a new video with evaluation. It doesn't sound that good, but I think it was $28 or something. And then here's this one is another dynamic mic. Again, it's got the XLR. Does not need phantom power. It does not have any controls for bass roll off or anything like that. But this one is made by Sennheiser. Any comment on a mic like that? How would I use that?
Yeah, the E835. I own several of them. In fact, I have a interesting story about the Sennheiser E835 that you're holding up. When I opened my podcast studio in New Jersey in 2012, I had a table where I was going to sit and 3 other people were going to sit. So I needed to buy 3 other microphones. I went to the music store with my little digital recorder and I said, what kind of handheld mics do you have? And they gave me like 4 or 5 handheld mics. Of course, the SM58 was one of them. The E835 that you had right there, that was one of them, and a few others. I took my recorder into a corner of this. It was Guitar Center. I went into a corner and I quickly recorded my voice on all 4 of these mics. And then I listened back and I was like, the E835 won, actually. It beat out the 58 to my voice, to my ears. And so I ended up buying 3 of them, and that's what I used in my studio. So that E835, that's a nice mic. I like that one.
So we got a commercial break. We got to talk about what comes after the microphone, and we probably should talk a little bit more about mic selection and the room acoustics, the space that you're recording in, because a lot of people recording at home on the kitchen table. It's not an ideal situation at all. Most kitchens are full of hard surfaces that bounce audio everywhere. So maybe you can give us some advice on how a person would make the best of a bad situation. And we'll look at the idea of mic preamplifiers and whether they really make a difference or not. And we'll move from there. You're watching This Week in Radio Tech. It's episode 526. I'm Kirk Harnack, along with our guest, Chris Curran. He's the founder and president of the podcast engineering school. That's it. And he's been on the show before, but we're glad to have him back. In fact, I did go through his test of like 10 microphones in a row, and that's how Chris and I met. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by a terrific company that makes great broadcast equipment, and that is Innovonics. They've been around for a long time. The first audio processor I ever bought when I was literally like 18 years old, I'm managing a radio station, was an Innovonics. And we're going to hear about their Aaron 655 box right now. We'll be right back.
The Aaron 655 is the latest addition to the Innovonics family of rebroadcast receivers, designed specifically for FM broadcast translators, also referred to as relay transmitters. The Aaron 655 is unique as an uncompromising DSP-based HD radio and FM receiver combined with a powerful 3-band audio processor and dynamic RDS encoder. IP connectivity adds streaming capabilities, and a web browser interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. The Aaron 655 gives you maximum flexibility for program sources. Select Program Audio from analog FM, digital channels HD1 through 8, streaming sources, and analog or AES digital line inputs, all with assignable failover audio backup. The internal RDS encoder allows you to customize your RDS messaging. You can use incoming off-air RDS data, convert HD radio pad data to RDS, convert streamed metadata to RDS, or receive IP telnet data. Comprehensive audio processing includes gated and windowed AGC, a unique syllabic leveler, 3 bands of compression, and both wideband and independent HF limiting. Easy setup is achieved by using 10 factory presets and 10 customizable presets. The processor also supports day parting, allowing automatic preset changes to follow different programming formats throughout your broadcast day. The front panel has an OLED display and jog wheel with intuitive menus for easy setup, advanced control, and editing for all operating parameters. The Aaron 655 dynamic web interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. A comprehensive set of menus includes a quick overview of now playing info, input-output control, processor options, RDS encoder, alarms and notifications, SNMP settings, and much more. You can also listen to the live audio broadcast streamed through the web interface.
I got to put in a plug for the Inovonics Aaron 655, the RDS encoder. I tell you, the folks at Inovonics have got RBDS in the US really figured out, and they make it very convenient to put RDS, to put that text on your FM radio, and it works really, really well. I'm excited about that. Good stuff from Inovonics, and of course you can buy Inovonics products from Broadcasters General Store at bgs.cc. You can give them a call because they love the telephone. If you want to talk to a real body and find out about what's the best product to buy, what's going to fix my fill my needs, how much does it cost, what's my discount, how soon can I get it? Call them at 352-622-7700. That's 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. Hey, Kirk Harnack, I'm in here along with Chris Curran. We're talking about microphones and making your audio better for podcasters. Chris, one of the biggest problems that I hear on whether it's a podcast or even disc jockeys, presenters working from home is I hear a lot of bad acoustics, or I hear a lot of acoustic noise that I don't want to hear, a lot of echo, reverb, dog barking way in the background. What kind of things do you run across that makes for bad audio because of the space?
Yeah, all of the above. People who record podcasts, for the most part, they don't have a studio. Like, they don't have a room of their house that they've converted into a soundproof studio to go into. They're just sitting wherever they're going to sit in their home, usually in their office at their desk. And all that background noise and all the distracting noises and the reverb in the room, the reflections in the room, is caused by two things. One is the room itself. If a room has just bare walls and a hardwood floor and windows, the sound is going to bounce around a lot. So you have the reflections in the room, and the other side of that coin is the distance from the microphone that the person is. So to get the best audio, you should cut down the reflections in the room as much as possible, and we can talk about how to do that. Also, get close to the microphone. Amateurs and people who are guests on podcasts, they don't know anything about audio, and they don't know that they should be close to the mic, because the closer you are to the mic, the higher the signal to noise ratio, and that's really important. What you want is the signal, which is the person's voice. What you don't want is the noise, which is in the room and all that. And the way to get a better signal to noise ratio is to speak close to your mic. Some people don't know that. They'll just put a mic on a table like two or 3 feet away, and even if you have a heated room, it's still going to sound like you're in this room. So it's a combination of both those things.
I think for the average person in the average house or apartment, condo, oftentimes, if you don't have any special room set aside that you've treated in some way, oftentimes the best random room in the house is going to be a bedroom, because typically a bedroom has this big fluffy thing in the middle of it called a bed, right? And that's going to absorb some sound. Typically a bedroom may have windows, but it'll probably have curtains over the windows. So it's got some other soft surfaces, and I've got friends who are voiceover artists. They've got work to do even when they're on the road or on vacation, maybe during non-COVID times, and they'll make a little fort. The best fort I've seen is when people will in the hotel room, they'll go grab the ironing board, right? Or they'll get one delivered to the room, and a full up ironing board. They'll set it up and they'll put it on the desk, and then they'll go strip the quilt off the bed, right? And they'll drape the quilt. They'll make them just like you were a kid. They'll make the fort over the ironing board, right? And have all this sound absorption. And then they'll put their microphone, right like this. This is a EV, what is this one? Oh, a RE27 ND. And they'll put that in there. And so they'll close talk the mic, and they've got all that fluffy around them. And then if they need to, they'll go get a couple of pillows off the bed, and they'll stick those on the left or right side to give. So the idea is not to, it's not like trying to be an anechoic chamber. You're just trying to get rid of reflections, which don't add to your intelligibility. They take away from it. And you want to have that nice, intimate sound. And you can get it even in a hotel room.
Yeah.
You think?
And a lot of podcasters actually, especially if they have like a walk-in closet, they'll literally pull a chair and a small table into the closet and to just record right in their closet, because all the clothing absorbs all the reflection, or most of the reflection.
Of course. Hey, in fact, a friend of mine, a lady friend of mine who does a national radio show during COVID times, she posted a picture on Facebook of her actually laying on her tummy in her clothes closet, just surrounded by dresses. And the microphone was on a stand about like this. And she would just, prop up a little bit and talk into the microphone. It was a perfect environment for that. So yeah, an environment, and you'd be surprised at what voiceover artists do to make that work. And it's all normal.
Yeah. And if you are in your office, or if you don't want to be in the bedroom or in the closet, you can be in a normal room or another room, and then you can get some foam like you see behind me. You can see I have foam leaning up against the wall. So that absorbs a lot of the reflections. Those are big pieces of foam, and I have them leaning up against the wall. So they're not permanent. I can actually roll them up and move them out. But they absorb so much of the reflections of this room. Really helps.
Now Suncast, our producer, is going to hate me for this, but Suncast, why don't you full screen me? I'm going to move my camera around just a little bit here. Okay. All right. Now, so this room that I'm in was built in the basement. It was extremely echoey before I moved everything into it and took care of all the bounciness. I mean, you clapped your hands, and I swear you heard the reverberation for the next 5 minutes. It was just awful. The carpet helped out. Of course, if you got a hardwood floor and you want to make it a room where you actually produce audio, carpet or rugs will help a lot. Curtains help a lot. Even putting up drapes on bare walls will help an enormous amount. I've got actually that in my bedroom. I've got this big tapestry that I got in American Samoa. They make these beautiful tapestries, and that's hanging up on one wall to really deaden the sound. But check out above me here. This is one thing that people forget about. Look, I've got some, there we go. I've got some panels, some foam above me, because that's a really flat, hard surface up there. Well, up there, that's kind of weird. And then behind me, there's some bass traps. There's a bass trap there in the corner, and there's bass traps there behind me, just above the TWiRT sign. And then I bought a kit, and so there's some more panels there over there, and they're all around the room too. I've got some more bass traps where I could. So this room, I think, is, hey, I'm not sure I'd record the next record in here, but it's pretty good. And I spent about $275 on a kit off Amazon. And I had some pieces left over too. I couldn't use it all, but I had enough to make it effective. So if you want to make a home studio that's, well controlled for acoustics, you can do it, and you can probably do it for just a few $100s.
That's great. I love how you did that. And so if you, and you don't have to make it like a recording studio, you just have to dampen it enough. And then the other half of the equation is being close to your mic. And so if you deaden the room a little bit and get close to your mic, that's it. That you're good.
Good deal. So, I just had a couple more mics here. I'll show off for a sec. So this is a pretty actually, I bought this mic to be a prop in a video. I didn't buy it to make audio. I think I got it at Guitar Center, and I said, I need the cheapest mic you have for a prop. So there you go. Now this one, Chris, this is a little unusual for radio people, but not unusual for video people. This is a a Rode mic, and all that's different is it's got extra long handle, so that when you're doing a video interview, you don't have to get your hand up in somebody's face like that.
Right.
You can hold the mic down here and get the mic close to their mouth, down under their chin or so, but you don't have to get their hand up in their personal space.
Yeah, I learned about that mic a while back. I think, is it called the Rode Reporter or something?
I think so. Yes, it actually is. Yeah.
And I think it might be omnidirectional as well. Is that true?
It might be. And I when they say a mic like this is omnidirectional, I've always have a hard time understanding, well, how does it hear over here? Because there's metal between here and there. But yeah, supposedly they are omnidirectional. It might be. I've used it on this show when I'm out remote a few times, and it's worked very well for us.
Yeah, that's great. That's good for, the man on the street reporting, and that's great. I know people who use that. Ross Brand actually uses that as well.
Well, if you're going to be doing a video podcast or video segments in your podcast, I would not suggest a little short mic like this, because then you got to get your hand up in people's face, and that's just kind of rude. The
Right.
long mic. Remember the old TV show Match Game PM or Match Game? They had these really long, like telescopic microphones. So he'd hold his hand down around chest level, and yet the mic would be, this little capsule. I'm sure it was a condenser mic, because there's a little tiny little capsule up at the end of it.
I remember that.
Oh.
Yeah, that's funny.
All right. Generally dynamic mics are going to be best for people. You want to deaden the sound in some ways that we talked about. What comes after the microphone that people need to worry about?
Well, mic technique, how do you speak into a microphone? I mean, like you demonstrated earlier, when you turned your mic around, it sounds way different. I mean, the same thing would happen with me if I come over here and talk over here. I mean, it sounds completely different, right? So you got to talk, you got to be aware that the microphone is here picking up your voice and basically talking to the mic, which means if you're going to move over here a little, then angle your head toward the mic. If you're going to move over here, angle your head toward the mic. You can move around a little, but still face the mic. That makes a huge difference, because if you just turn your head like this and talk like this, it's a completely different sound. So that's called mic technique, getting good. You see this with music, with singers, right? Like, let's take Mariah Carey as an example. Mm-hmm. Watch a Mariah Carey live performance. Watch her, how she holds the mic. When she's, I wish I had one of my handheld mics here.
Well, here, I'll imitate what you're talking about. So I'm holding the mic. I'm Mariah Carey. I'm singing. And
when she's getting like intimate, she'll hold the mic close to her mouth.
Right.
And she'll sing intimate. And then when she belts it out, she'll literally hold the mic like a foot or a foot and a half away from her mouth.
Yeah.
She'll be like, wah! And that's because her so loud. If she kept it near her mouth and sang that loud, it would be really loud. So she's changing the volume of her voice by the proximity of the microphone to her mouth. And she's a real pro at that. Wow.
Who was really good at that was Kenny Rogers, the late Kenny Rogers. You watched him perform, and he would, and it almost looks like an affectation, but it not only does it make the sound person's job easier, because they're not having to deal with, oh my gosh, he's way too loud. Oh my God, I got to turn it back up now. But when Kenny or any professional is doing that, they're pulling away probably also when they're going to pop a pee, right? Please, baby, please, right? You're going to pull the mic away and not pop your pee into the mic. But when you hit those strong notes, you don't want to distort the mic preamp that may be sitting in the wireless mic transmitter that's in the mic itself, or at the end of the cable, the mic preamp, if it's wired up. You want to, not cause problems for the audio system. And you're kind of doing your own compression that way, right? You're being a lot louder, but you're not putting all that loudness into the mic, but you are putting all the energy in, right? The energy of your voice. So when you're talking, if you're going to talk loud, get back a little bit and talk loud. But if you're going to make a point, really dig into it and make a point like that, then you can get close and close talk.
Beautiful.
So podcast, get used to that. It's okay.
I also advocate, like, when you're going to laugh real loud, like throw your head back, be like, ah, ha, ha. Because when people laugh really loud right into the mic, that's jarring for the listener, man. That's terrible. But one of the reasons why mic technique is important for those singers when they're performing live is because when you're performing live on stage, the sound guy can't really use too much compression, because if he uses too much compression, that brings up the noise floor and then there's feedback happening. So you can only use a little bit of compression. So then it's, if a singer's a real pro, they'll manage that. Anyway, as a podcaster or a radio personality, anyone, develop good mic technique. And it's one of those things where if you think about it and develop it for a few months, then it just becomes natural. You'll never think about it again, but you'll have great mic technique for the rest of your life. So
exactly. Well, that's a great point. Yes. Think about it for a while and until it becomes habit, and then you'll never have to worry about it again. Yeah. Good deal. Good deal. So let's, we're going to have to go to break soon, but let's talk a little bit about that preamp. A lot of people spend a lot of time, as much time figuring out what to do with the preamp as they do with the microphone. It doesn't have to be a tough decision. What's your advice on that? Let's say you're not using the USB out of the microphone itself, like the Shure MV7, but you're going to go into a preamp that maybe has USB coming out of it to go to your computer, whatever. What's your advice for the pre?
Yeah, so most people, if they're just using a regular XLR microphone, they're going to run the XLR cable into an audio interface, which is a little box that's connected to their computer. And so that audio interface is going to have a mic preamp, which boosts up the gain of the microphone. That's the simplest way. If you want to upgrade from that, then you might want to buy like a channel strip, which is another piece of hardware that probably has a mic pre, has a compressor, has some EQ, and maybe some other processing as well. And then that'll be a higher quality mic pre and processing for your voice. But for podcasting, especially, like people aren't going to go out and buy expensive mic pre's and stuff. So as long as you use something decent, like a decent interface, I mean, that's probably good enough for most people. And if you do want to go to the next level, then, make an investment like I did. I invested in a channel strip, which has a mic. I can't turn my camera, but it's a Neve Portico 2, costs around $3,300. The quality is insane. And I'm going to own this for the rest of my life. And I'm going to use this for the rest of my life, literally. So for me, I was willing to invest in something that was killer because I'm going to use it so often for the rest of my life. So
I see a lot of people using, and I have in my remote kit, a box from Focusrite, right? So it's got a mic input, an instrument input, and then a USB output. There's a lot of boxes on the market. Behringer has them for, about $100, $110, maybe on sale for $79. Behringer, Focusrite, M Audio. I'm using an M Audio right now, but there's all these brands of very similar boxes on the market that connect, have a mic pre and then a USB out to your computer. For a lot of applications, are those adequate, do you think?
Yeah, for mostly they are adequate. The only issue might be that some microphones actually have a low output. So, and the Shure SM7B, the classic mic that we referenced several times so far, that one is notorious for having a very low output. So when you plug in a Shure SM7B, you usually have to crank the mic pre up a lot. And when you if you use a cheaper audio interface, like even a Scarlett 2i2 from Focusrite or M Audio, you could probably crank up the mic preamp all the way and it's still not really loud enough. So for those cases, one of the things they make is a gain booster, which there's one called a FET head, there's one called a cloud lifter. You plug your mic into the gain booster and it jacks up the gain by like 20 or 25 dB or even 30 dB. And then it goes to the mic preamp. And so for mics that have low gain output, or low sensitivity is what it's technically called, you can use one of those gain boosters to crank it up before it even gets to the preamp. That's really the only issue. Other than that, those smaller audio interfaces are good. Yeah.
And I appreciate what you say there, because the $100, $150, $200 audio interface probably is not going to have a world-class input stage on the mic pre. In other words, it might be a little bit more noisy than what you'd hope for, especially if you're having to crank it up all the way. And you mentioned the FET head or the cloud lifter. That's an add-on device that you put between the mic and that input. It's powered by phantom power coming out of the out of the USB interface box, typically. Yeah,
Yep.
and they're designed with a very sensitive front end to look at the microphone with a very quiet front end, and they don't have other bells and whistles. Their whole job is just take that very small signal from some microphones, lift it up, and send it on to your somewhat inexpensive mic to USB interface. And so, okay, good to know. I've had decent luck. I'm using a DBX 286S, which is about a $250 channel. You said channel strip. That's a good way to call it. So a channel strip is typically a mic pre, some EQ, some audio processing, and then some output, right?
Okay. Yeah. So a channel strip. If you look at pictures of old consoles, mixing boards, the big ones, each little strip, at the top of each channel is a mic preamp, then a compressor, and then an EQ. So it's like a strip off of that big console that has all the processing in it. That's what a channel strip is. It has, again, typically has a mic pre, compressor, EQ, and sometimes other things. But yeah, they're really handy, obviously.
And I could talk about this for hours and hours. We only have 1 hour, so we're going to take our middle of the show break about 15 minutes late here. And when we come back, we still have to talk about some other cool equipment that you want to show us, a Zoom pod track, for example, and then some post-production plugins like from iZotope, Reaper. I want to find out about this Reaper thing. And you've got, and you'll talk about also a free digital audio workstation like Audacity compared to some other ones and what you got to watch out for when you're using something like Audacity. So that's coming up. We're with Chris Curran. He runs the podcast engineering. He does a podcast about it, and he also does this school where he'll teach you about podcasting and getting the best quality. And today, for a little while, you've got him for free. So that's great. I'm Kirk Harnack, and This Week in Radio Tech will be back right after this from Broadcast Bionics.
Hi, I'm Phil from Broadcast Bionics in the UK, and we've been helping broadcasters and podcasters to work remotely for some time. But in 2020, this has become more of a necessity for many. X-Screen, Bionic Studio and our other products can be fully functional via the internet on a VPN connection or RDP session. If you have any type of Telos VX, HX6 or IQ6, you may already be using the free edition of X-Screen 2, giving you a software interface to go alongside your VSET controller. The subscription edition not only adds a cloud database and unrestricted workstation licenses, but also allows the user to call screen using a USB headset. Bionic Talkshow, part of the Bionic Studio, also allows this. Up until now, it's mainly been used for remote broadcasts, but now more and more stations have call screeners and producers working from home or socially distanced offices. The teams can still collaborate, communicate and deliver programming with the help of our tools. Many routers will have a VPN option. Your local IT specialist can help with this. Using a VPN, our workstation client software can be run on a home PC or laptop as if it was running on a machine in the studio. With remote desktop, the software still runs on a PC at the station. Simple port forwarding on your router may be all that's required to then control that PC and deliver the headset audio from another device using RDP, which is available as part of Windows. For technical help, our support team are on hand. You can email them on support@bionics.co.uk. Combined with our Anywhere and Skype TX for radio products, broadcast quality audio can be delivered from contributors around the corner or around the globe. They can even instant message with the shared chat windows and see the now playing information from within the Anywhere remote web interface. For more information, go to bionic.radio. We're helping broadcasters around the world to adapt to the new normal with innovative tools from Broadcast Bionics.
Awesome people there with some terrific tools for your radio station for content creation. Broadcast Bionics at bionic.radio. Check them out, and they're a huge selection of software and products to help you make great radio, including great social media. You can create social media from the work you're already doing with Broadcast Bionics. Love those folks. They make some good stuff. All right. I'm Kirk Harnack here with Chris Curran, and Chris is a podcasting expert. He's produced plenty of music, songs, albums, and done studio recording. and he's here to help podcasters get good quality. So, boy, I wish we had a lot of time left. We don't have so much time. We're going to save our top 5 tips, which we'll summarize for you at the end of the show. So stick with us to the end of the show. We'll have our top 5 tips. But Chris, we want to chat a little bit about some cool equipment. This Zoom PodTrack. What is a PodTrack from Zoom?
Yeah, so Zoom recently came out with a few small pieces of hardware. They're meant to record audio on the go. There's the P4 and also the P8. Now, I don't own either of these, but they seem very handy, and they've been making some waves in the podcasting space. Anyway, the reason to bring this up is just to emphasize that companies are creating more hardware for podcasters to go and record stuff and even integrate phone calls into their recordings and a bunch of different stuff. Zoom as a company, at quality wise is good. I wouldn't call them the highest quality audio you can get. Certainly their mic preamps are okay. They're maybe good. So just be aware of that. These aren't like high end pieces of hardware here. So, but again, I don't own them, so I don't know how much we should really talk about it, except to introduce them to the audience.
I've got an older piece of Zoom equipment that I've used a few times, but not in real professional applications, and it's kind of cool. It's got a little feature-laden little board. It does MIDI in and out, and I don't know anything about MIDI, and I don't play any instruments, but it does have some mic pre's on it. So the P4 and the P8, I guess they help you go sit down with other people and record your podcast segments if you want to there. Next, though, we're going to talk about post-production, because we've talked about microphones. That's the main capture device, right? And yeah, I know there's whole other areas we could talk about, like getting callers on the air. In fact, I've got a product over here I'm going to talk about, of course, during our last spot break. That'll help you get callers on the air through your cell phone. But let's move on to post-production. Why is post-production necessary, and what do I need to think about doing between the time I record my stuff and the time I publish it?
Yeah, so one of the most important things about podcasting is to understand that when people are podcasting, when people are guests on podcasts, the guests, they don't know anything about audio. They don't have a real microphone. Typically, they're using earbuds. They're not in a studio. They don't know anything. They don't know how to get good audio. They don't have good equipment. So when a lot of podcasters record their interviews, a fair amount of time, the guest's audio needs quite a bit of work to get it up to standard, so that it's easy to listen to and audible and sounds good. So you could categorize it into 3 phases of post-production. The first phase is cleanup, where I can get rid of background noise or hums or mouth clicks or a lot of things, right? There's a software called iZotope RX8, which is invaluable for cleaning up audio. So the cleanup is one thing. Then comes the mixing, where you got to take, the host's voice, the guest's voice, the intro music, and you put it in a, DAW software and you mix it. I think of it like mixing a song. You got to make sure the guest and the host are about the same volume, and you got to make sure the music's not too loud, stuff like that.
If I could ask you real quick back about that iZotope RX8 software. So, you can fix a lot of things manually. Like I've gone through and I've read a chapter of a book and gone and reduced the volume of my breaths, right? And I thought, man, why am I breathing so loudly? Good gosh. And I would go and mark the beginning and the end of the obvious breath and either cut it out, or sometimes that's too abrupt. So I would just drop it 20 dB. And you wouldn't notice the breath, or it would sound more natural. It wouldn't sound like I was gasping for air. So you're saying iZotope kind of identifies this and does it automatically for you, or what?
Yeah, they have a de-breath module in RX, which it finds all the breaths, and you can reduce them all. It has a de-plosive. A lot of people, if they're not using protection on their mic, there can be these low-end plosives, and iZotope has a de-plosive. It'll scan the whole thing and just remove all the plosives in like no time. So
wow.
And a hum, and there's like around 30 modules. So it's all several different types of noise reduction. It really makes cleaning up audio a lot easier. iZotope
Now,
RX8.
Now, some of these DAWs, digital audio workstations, or multi-track editors, they might be known by. Even a free one like Audacity has a noise reduction thing where you sample some quiet time, some noise, some room noise, or maybe you call it room tone. I like that phrase. You sample that, and then you say, okay, now go find that and take it out of this recording. I guess iZotope does that, but maybe more automatically.
Well, iZotope does it, but way better. I mean, when you're talking about DAWs like Audacity and Reaper and Logic Pro and Hindenburg Journalist Pro, like they're a DAW. They're not in the business of making audio processors. They make some audio processors, but that's not their strong suit. Right. I guess the exception might be Adobe Audition, which does have quite a bit of very good quality processors in it, like denoise and some of these other things. But when it comes to the weird stuff like deplosive and debreath and dehum and there's way more. I mean, anyway, when it comes to not so common processors, iZotope has them all, and they are really good quality.
What kind of money are we talking about, and how do they work with your audio files? Is it a plugin or something, or a standalone program? How's that work?
It's both. It's a standalone program, and you can use all the different modules as plugins. I think the standard edition of RX8 might cost around $800, and I think at the advanced RX8, which has everything, is probably around $1,200. So it's not cheap, but it's not that expensive. I mean, for someone like me who I'm producing podcasts for clients, so I get audio that's horrendous and I need to make it better. So RX for me is like, it's a godsend, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, a lot of things you could do manually, but this does it better and faster, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, better is questionable. I mean, if you were to go through and lower every breath by hand, that would probably technically be a higher quality, but the time it takes would be
what's your time worth? Now, you've mentioned Reaper a couple of times. Now that's a DAW? That's a digital audio workstation?
Yeah, Reaper's a DAW. It's by far the best DAW that nobody knows about, or no one realizes it's one of the best DAWs. Reaper is unbelievably awesome. I think in the music space, everyone uses Pro Tools, and like they think of Reaper, it's like, well, it's not Pro Tools. But Reaper is just really good. It's not that expensive. It's sort of like an open source project, but you can use it for free for the rest of your life. But you can also pay and give them some money because they created it. Anyway, I love Reaper. I use Reaper, and it's great.
In our show notes, you use the word mastering as something to talk about here. I always think of that. Well, your former career in producing records, and you master just before it, gets laid down to whatever the consumer's going to get. What's mastering for a podcast?
It's the main part of mastering for a podcast is bringing the loudness level of the entire episode, bringing it up to the industry standards, so that when you publish your podcast episode, it's at the correct loudness. It's not too low. It's not too loud. It's at the correct loudness. And the industry standards, although they're not actual standards, they're just sort of like agreed upon standards. For stereo audio, it's -16 LUFS, and for mono, it's -19 LUFS. And those are loudness units. LU is loudness units. So yeah, that's basically the part of mastering that's really important for podcasts. But like you said, coming from the music side of production, I also do a little more compression, a little more EQ, I just make it bang a little harder, if you want to call it like that. But it's not necessary to do that, but crazy audio people like me, that's what we do. Right. So
you want your podcast or your podcast for your client to sound as good as possible, and to not necessarily cut through any fog, but be audible. You want to be, and I think you want to have the listener set the volume level once and not have to touch it again, and it's at the right level the whole time.
Yeah, you nailed it. And the dynamic range of the podcast is really important. There's a lot of people most people who record their own podcasts and publish it, they don't use any compression at all, which means that the loud parts are really loud and then the low parts are really low. I was driving in my car. Drive in your car and try to listen to podcasts through your car stereo. And 75% of the podcasts that you try to listen to, you won't be able to listen to them because you have to ride the volume knob. It gets too loud. You got to turn it down. And then they start whispering, and then you got to crank it up. Yeah. That's not good. What you said is spot on, is that you want them to set the volume and leave it there, which means when you're producing the audio, you need to compress the dynamic range. And so when it gets loud, it doesn't get too loud. And then when it gets soft, it doesn't get too soft. It's a nice range, and it provides a nice experience for the listener. That's the whole point of audio production, providing a nice experience to the listener, and compression is necessary for that. So.
And I, a whole show could be done on compression. I certainly have heard things that are way over compressed. They're just a wall of sound, and that's not good either. That's fatiguing. There's also, compressors built into programs like, and I've used Audacity, and I must say, I'm not entirely happy with the compressor or the controls that are built into Audacity. To me, they are compression done using mathematical algorithms without much regard to how does this algorithms sound, right? And so for programs that you pay for, and I work for a company that, Telos, our Omnia processors, we have algorithms, but we also have spent literally thousands of hours listening to tough pieces of music and talk to tweak those algorithms so that they are not just textbook math algorithms, but they're actually tuned to the way human ears hear. And all I'm getting at is that Chris says, hey, you probably need some compression to keep your levels, consistent and the same, but it's easy to overdo it too and have something that's a little fatiguing to listen to. There's a nice balance somewhere, and be aware that, in my opinion, the tools you have may or may not do that adequately. And so, Chris, maybe you could mention, what are some of your favorite ways to get an appropriate sounding compression into your mastered podcast?
Yeah, so I actually love third-party plugins. So I use Reaper as my DAW, but I don't use any of the processing that Reaper provides. None of it. I buy third-party plugins. I buy compressors and EQs that are modeled off the classic analog gear from the music studios. So for instance, you can, from Plugin Alliance, I bought the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. It's a 2-stage compressor. It sounds amazing. It's unbelievable. Now, it's a little expensive. It was on sale. I got it for $100. No, on sale I got it for $200. It's normally $400 for one compressor. Well, it's actually 2 compressors in one, but that compressor just sounds amazing. So what I do is I amass a small toolbox of really great processors, some great EQs, some great compressors, and then when I use them, they just sound great, and it's great.
So give me, I'm sorry, we're running so short on time. I keep hearing the term a VST plugin. What is a VST plugin?
Well, VST is just like the file format or whatever, but audio plugins are easy. When you go into your DAW, you usually have an effects button where you can add different plug-in effects. That's what they are. So all you do is open your DAW, you click on effects, and then you'll see a list of all the plugins you have. So I see, this famous compressor, this awesome EQ. So I could just click on them and add them to a track. Let's say it's my voice, and I can put that compressor and EQ on my track and then tweak it till it sounds good right in the DAW. It's actually really easy. And then, of course, when you're done, you just hit render, and it renders the whole episode.
We've got 5 tips coming up right after the break, but let's get a couple more definitions. Audacity, you said, is a destructive DAW. What does that mean quickly?
Yeah, that means Audacity, when you make changes, when you cut the audio and delete things and stuff, and then you hit save, the original file is now overwritten. It's gone. So that's called destructive. Whatever changes you make, it actually overwrites the file. So if you're going to use Audacity, make sure you have your original files and then make copies of them and work on those copies. Always have the originals in the backup. Pretty much every other software that I can think of, you can always undo. And the DAW does not actually edit the source files at all. Like, the source files are always as they are. And then, for instance, Reaper will make the changes in Reaper to cut things out and edit it. But your source files are never destroyed, so it's non-destructive.
So there's a cool online service you told me about in the pre-show, and that is Auphonic, Auphonic, Auphonic. What is that?
Yeah, it's really handy in the podcasting space because you can upload your audio and it'll compress your audio a little. It'll do some noise reduction if you want to. It'll roll off some low end if you want to, and there's some advanced parameters as well. Podcasters mainly use this as their mastering step because they can mix down their episode, and the last step they upload it to Auphonic. And Auphonic will set the level to the proper LUFS level. Remember that we talked about the proper LUFS level. And then you download the final file from Auphonic, and then that's your podcast episode, and it's at the right level. And again, there's some noise reduction. There's a couple processes in there. Very handy, easy to use. It's really easy for people who don't want to get into all these plugins that we're talking about. They can just use Auphonic, and it does a good job.
I need to make sure that I mention one thing. Since I'm in the Telos Alliance studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, and my employer, the Telos Alliance, also has online audio sweetening, production, compression. It's from our division called Minnetonka Audio. So Auphonic is certainly one way to go. Minnetonka tends to be more geared toward professional broadcasters, but it's certainly open to podcasters too at Minnetonka Audio. Part of Telos Alliance. The last thing I got to ask you about before we take the break and head toward the 5 tips is Descript. What is Descript?
Yeah, so I haven't used this really at all, but Descript is a newer platform which is proved to be really handy for podcasters and a lot of other areas of production as well. What you do is you upload your audio and Descript immediately transcribes everything. So now, in addition to seeing the waves on the screen, you will literally see text above it. And what's cool about Descript is you can literally, if you highlight, let's say there's a sentence you want to delete, you just highlight the text of that sentence and then hit delete, and it will delete, it'll edit the audio just because you deleted some text. So it's handy for a lot of, I think, radio people as well. There's a bunch of other things, like it'll automatically remove ums and ahs, and it does a lot more than that. And they also seem like a company that is always getting better. And Descript seems like a really cool platform, basically.
Got to try that out. Is the once it does speech to text and gives you that, is it searchable then? You know?
Oh, I don't know. Probably. Yeah. I don't see why not.
I think so. Yeah. Like, oh man, I said banana 300 times during that interview. I want to cut it down some. Or every time I said banana, I meant sheep. So,
yeah. Wow.
So, all right. Hey, we're going to be back with our top 5. We're going to tell you the top 5 things you need to worry about to make sure that your podcast audio is as good as possible with Chris Curran, our guest on the show. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by my friends at Angry Audio. Don't get mad, get angry. This is their famous under the counter or over the counter. It's got little feet on it, so it'll sit nice and nice over the counter, or you can screw it in under the counter like this, and those feet will help keep it nice and quiet and firmly attached. It's a headphone amp, and it goes conveniently right under the counter, where your knees would go. But look how cute this is. Look how sexy this curve is. You will not. I have never snagged my pantyhose on this headphone amp, not once, and you won't either. You get this Angry Audio. It's called the Headphone Gizmo, the Headphone Gizmo. It's powered by a 16-volt AC, will power wall wart, and you can just use one of those, and you can send that power on to other, daisy chain style, other headphone amps of the same kind, just using Cat5 cable. It's got Cat5 connectors on the back that carries the left and right audio. You can use that for your audio in and then your audio out that gets daisy chained to other units. So if you've got to build a podcast studio where you're putting in 3, 4, 5 mic positions, well, that's your box right there. Great headphone amp. It's really awesome. And as I mentioned, if you want to put callers on the air in your podcast studio, this box, the Bluetooth audio gadget, will really help you out to do that. It has XLR connectors on the back, so it plugs into your audio console. Whether it's a low-end console, a Behringer or a Mackie, or whether it's a high-end broadcast console, either way. And then you just flip this little button right here on the front to put it in pairing mode right there. And you pair it up with your phone. Now you can put phone callers on the air in your podcast studio or in your home studio without having to get a separate POTS line and a hybrid and all that kind of thing. You can do it with the Bluetooth audio gadget from Angry Audio. Hey, we're going to hear from my friends at Max Connect Audio. Be right back with those 5 top tips.
I'm Gary Morrow. Midwest Regional Director of Engineering for Alpha Media. When I first spoke with Josh Bone about Max Connect, he told me they'd worked great for remote transmitter sites where connectivity was a challenge. And he's absolutely right. We even have sites where we're using this as a backup to our STL using Max Connect's dual carrier option, and it works perfectly. We also have times where we need to be able to get out to a venue where it's kind of challenging because everybody and his brother is trying to stream video at the same time, like at a big sporting event. And you know what? Our data gets through every time because it's prioritized packet data. It works for us. It'll work for you. Max Connect. Check it out.
And when we had that really unfortunate problem at the AT&T building here in Nashville, and our fiber was down, Max Connect right to the rescue. Of course, it didn't work on the AT&T network. I just told it to, hey, use your Verizon SIM card. And, Mama and kid and daddy all here at the Harnack house, we all had our internet back, and it was great to have. Plus, I've used it at transmitter sites. You get a fixed IP address so you can stream audio. You can push audio to your transmitter sites and use it very conveniently. Hey, we got to go soon, so let's get right to these top 5 tips, and they are, Chris, we're gonna run through them here. I'll say what it is, and you give me a sentence about it. What's the most important thing? Number 1, your space. What's important there?
Yeah, the space that you're recording in, we talked about this, is the background noise. You want to eliminate as much background noise, and then also dampen reflections. And also, that's it. Mic technique's another one. I'm not going to mention that yet.
The bedroom blanket and pillows are your friends for space. Don't think it's weird. People do it all the time. Number 2, use decent equipment. At least, no need to spend the ton, however.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to spend a ton of money. Like, you don't have to buy a $3,300 channel strip like I did. But if you buy just decent equipment and take care of it, you will literally sound good for the rest of your life. I especially tell this to even corporate people who are joining these webinars. It's like, buy something, even if it's a decent headset, just buy something decent. You'll sound good for the rest of your life. Very important.
Mic technique. What's important there?
Well, mic technique is so important because, if you have bad mic technique, you're going to drive the listeners crazy. I mean, you got to stay close to the mic, speak into the mic. When you get loud, maybe move away. And it makes a huge difference. And it's hard to explain it, but it really does.
Compression in post, and I'll add that I like a little compression as it's going recording. That's why I have a mic processor. I don't do a lot with it, but it keeps me from blowing away my record levels on something. But tell me about compression in post.
Yeah, compression in post is just vital. Coming from the music studios, we basically use compression on everything almost. So compression is just one of those things, processes in audio that it makes the audio sound closer, more upfront, more intelligible. And I in post-production, I normally use literally at least one compressor on each voice, sometimes usually 2, sometimes 3, because it's better to compress a little bit with each one rather than just smashing it with one compressor.
I always like to remember that our ears are probably better than any electronics that we typically have in our studios, and in terms of dynamic range. So, finally, mixing matching levels of all participants. Music not too loud and music not too soft. What's your word about that?
Yeah, mixing is where it's at. I mean, look, the levels of the host and the guest have to be the same. How many podcasts have you heard where the host is big, loud with the radio voice, and then the guest is like, thanks for having me. Yes. I'm so happy to be here. I mean, you can't listen to that. So you got to match the levels. And the other thing is music. How many podcasts have you listened to where the music comes in? It blows the top of your head off your skull. It's so loud. Or the music is way too low. And then when the host comes in, it's like, it just jars you. So you got to mix the levels properly, at least get them close. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you're going to have music, to bring you in, well, duck that music down. The host starts talking and make sure you can hear the host over the music. It may be and by the way, if the music has vocals in it, not the best time for the host to be talking, not the best time.
Good
vocals
point.
over
That's
vocals doesn't work well.
Yeah. Totally.
Chris, it's been a pleasure. I'm so glad to see you. And I sure enjoyed meeting you with the mic comparison that we did a few years ago. And thanks for keeping on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Kirk. It's been great. You're just a wonderful host. And if anybody wants to learn more about me and my school, my website is the place to go, podcastengineeringschool.com. You'll find everything there. If you just want to ping me and say hi, there's a contact page there too. So podcastengineeringschool.com. Thanks, Kirk.
We will put that in the show notes, podcastengineeringschool.com. Beautiful website and a lot of good advice there too. And you do a podcast about podcasting, don't you?
Oh yeah, it's called the Podcast Engineering Show. So wherever you listen to podcasts, go find my Podcast Engineering Show. What I do is I mostly interview people about how they're producing podcasts. So it's great.
Chris, thanks so much. We got to go. Chris Curran's been our guest for the show. We'll look for all the stuff in the show notes. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. We'll see you next week. And thank you, Suncast, for producing today's show so well. I really appreciate it. Thanks also to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.